briefing for Friday the 17th of June. The what? Friday the 7th of June. Oh my goodness. Yeah, clearly the end of the week. So today is the 7th of June. This is the Daily Cyber Briefing, and I'm Stephen Ridgway. There is proof of concept code published for an Apache huge graph remote code execution flaw. The particular vulnerability is tracked as CVE 2024 27348, and it is found in versions of HugeGraph Server before 1.3.0, which was April's release. The vulnerability can be abused to bypass sandbox restrictions and achieve remote code execution using specially crafted Gremlin commands. It has been rated with a CVSS score of 9.8, so relatively straightforward to exploit, and pretty serious consequences of obviously remote code execution is not a good thing. So article in the Register, we're a bit behind with linking the articles to the briefings, which is I'm going to say that is my fault. The person that normally does the linking for me is off at the moment, and I need to get my head around sorting that out. So I will, and I'll backdate some of the ones that I've previously spoken about this week. Register article is quite good. It's got quite good information. Recommend you have a read of that if you are using Apache's huge graph. There is, I think, an increasing concern about the business risks from deepfakes. So deepfakes have kind of moved from putting in the face of a celebrity onto a movie of somebody else kind of thing in very unrealistic ways, through to actually being pretty good imitations of the real people. Now, we've all seen the Donald Trump, Joe Biden discussions, and some Barack Obama ones as well, and they're hilarious, and obviously deep fakes. However, if they weren't saying deep, like obviously silly stuff, and they were being presented on a media channel that you would not necessarily associate with dodgy information, they could be quite believable. I think the risks to businesses, though, are just becoming, certainly becoming more apparent at a board level, but they're not, the proper understanding of what's going on isn't there yet. But it's stuff like voice messages, or so if the CFO phones up accounts payable and says, I've got this invoice that needs to be paid immediately, it takes a fairly brave junior to say, I'll only do that if I get official authorization, because the retort will be, I'm the bastard CFO, do as I say. You do find junior people with a great deal of integrity and kahunas the size of bowling balls that are prepared to put their job on the line in order to challenge somebody senior over something that's not been done right. That's great. A lot of people just won't do that way. So business fraud is becoming an increasingly lucrative option for attackers using deep fakes. I think all the stuff that we've seen so far is going to be limits. It's just going to be a small amount. I don't think we've even begun to reach the limits of where we're going to go with this stuff. Because the other side of it is, okay, so there's some direct things like this, but what if you just want to devalue the competition? Well, post some deep fake news out there. We've begun to see some of this stuff floating around in other arenas. I think the Russians, I think I spoke about it yesterday, the day before, the Russians attempted to persuade Poland that Donald Tusk was about to enact a mobilization and readiness for war in Poland. So this stuff is going on at all sorts of levels. What can we do about it? Well, that's actually quite difficult to say. I think at the moment the technologies favour the attacker rather than the defender in this space. Right now, because it's new, we can't quickly and easily identify all faked AI generated content. If there are sites out there you can go to that says, is this picture, which of these two pictures is the real one, kind of thing. Now, under those circumstances, I think most people would be at least reasonably good at spotting the glitches in the AI-generated stuff. But that's because you're specifically told one of these isn't real, choose it, in which case your brain is switched on to looking for anomalies. I think where this stuff becomes much more much harder to identify is when you're not expecting it to be fake. So you're not looking for the signs that it's fake because you trust the environment it's coming from. As I've said before, don't use social media as a method of gaining information or making decisions, especially about important things, because you just can't tell whether what you're seeing is real or not at the moment. So yeah, interesting article, certainly something that we need to be aware of. I think people's abilities to spot stuff will get better, but I think in the meantime, either there's going to be a whole load of misinformation that gets believed, or alternatively, people will just turn around and say, well, I don't believe anything that I've seen. It's on the web, so it can't be true. Neither of which are particularly great outcomes. And then finally from me today, there's an interesting article in Security Week that I come across. Why hackers love logs. Now, I kind of thought that everybody knew this stuff, but maybe they don't, or maybe they've forgotten. But as an attacker, two of the things that certainly that I would consider doing relatively early on in my attack. First one would be, if I could do it, to mess with time. And I don't mean in a kind of Einstein quantum way. What I mean is a lot of log analysis relies on the timestamps of the events. Okay, whilst it's not impossible to recreate a sequence of events without the timestamps, it's a hell of a lot harder, and it is it is much more difficult to do correlations with a single log type. You can probably work it out. If you've got multiple log types, working out what happened in what order is really difficult without timestamps, which is why using NTP and reliable time sources is one of the most important security protections that you can put in place. Um, it is a prereq to actually having logs that make any sense. So one of the first things I would do is to mess with times, because if you can mess with times, you can screw up the logs in such a way that your defenders will be scratching their heads whilst you're out there busily doing stuff. And then another thing that I would do is just manipulate the logs, clear down logs. Clearing down logs when you've finished what you're doing has always been a very standard method of operation for attackers that have gained access to stuff. But I think more interestingly, these days we would see people stealing logs because they have all sorts of useful information in them about the systems and the interactions with those systems. That's all in there. Might get a whole bunch of PII. You never know. Depends what the logs, the logs have got in them. But you can also, if you're clever at this stuff, manipulate the logs themselves. So leave the logs looking normal, but remove all references to yourself, sort of thing, so that because if you blat a log file, it's fairly obvious somebody's been in there and they've blatted it, because generally, you will have at least other logging somewhere that will note that this particular log's been rolled over or this particular log's been cleared or whatever it might be. It is more difficult to spot, although not impossible. It's more difficult to spot where particular entries have been taken out. And if you think, oh, that's not feasible, you can write scripts that will do this stuff if you know what you're doing. We're not talking about the uninitiated just having a pop at you. We're talking about people who actually know what they're doing. So log files. So what can we do about this stuff? Well, I think there's various things that we should be considering in this space. I think the first one is make sure all your security events are somewhere out off the devices that generated them. So don't rely on the logs on the device that generated the log. Yes, that's primary source data. Yes, it can be very useful. But ask the question, what happens if that device has been compromised and those logs have been deleted? Okay, so some form of log aggregation, SIEM, security visibility tooling, something like that. Pull the logs into somewhere else and then protect the somewhere else to the best of your ability. Also, don't rely on logs for security visibility, and it's something that we still really regularly come across in Pocket SIEM, that security company, that when we're talking to organizations, the understanding that security visibility is not the same as log aggregation, it's just not there. So you talk about you want to be gathering stuff into a SIEM, and people think you mean log aggregation. Actually, there are three domains of visibility, three domains of information that you need in order to have a really good grasp on what is happening, what your security posture is at any one moment in your organization. And that is what is actually happening on endpoints. And I don't just mean laptops, I mean servers, cloud-based stuff, endpoints in general, what's going on. What's flying around the network. Now, that may be you think you don't have a network, but believe me, you do. If it's on the net, there is a network somewhere. And running that network, you may still be able to get visibility of what's going on the network. And then the third domain is security logs, and I mean that in the broadest sense. So everything from Windows event logs through to SaaS logs, and you name it. There's stuff that can be pulled in. Don't pull in stuff that doesn't matter. Stick to the stuff that's got security relevance. But if you've got visibility of those three, if you imagine those three as kind of overlapping Venn diagrams, somewhere in the middle there'll be the point that you're aiming for, which is the point at which you've got the information that you need to hand. Now that means that log manipulation suddenly becomes a lot less useful to an attacker trying to hide their steps, because you've seen the other domains as well. So this isn't a plug. You don't have to use our tooling to do any of this stuff. This is a concept. Go away, think about it. None of it is too hard. People that say, "Oh, I can't capture network traffic; it's way too difficult." It's not. I've been doing it for over 20 years in some in big and small organizations. So network guys, infrastructure guys, you can make it happen if you choose to. So I hope you've had a good week, and I hope you're going to enjoy the weekend, and I will speak to you